We're going to look at word politics. We have titled it World War III, and you can see the question mark. Is there going to be a World War III? Has it started? Is Donald Trump going to trigger it? Where's the place of Africa in world politics? Donald Trump went into Iran. The 12-day war with Israel. Donald Trump has gone into Venezuela. In a bold move, he extracted the president of that country, Nicolas Maduro. Donald Trump has bombed Nigeria. Is he done with Nigeria? Does this resemble the radicalism of Adolf Hitler before World War II? Has the world become more chaotic? By the way, is the world not always chaotic? When Donald Trump bombed Nigeria on the 25th of December 2025, some rejoiced, some raised questions. Nigeria is a violent country, and the last president, Muhammadu Buhari, defended Nigeria. Buhari defended a violent country. Buhari defended a selfish political class. Buhari spoke about a poor Nigeria, and some talked about an uneventful country. So what does Bola Tinubu defend? Is it the same country with the same character? The character that Buhari defended? So the point is that the Nigerian leadership represents a system that is uninspiring. If the system is uninspiring, can we give an example of an inspiring country? A country we can learn from. For Donald Trump to have intervened, perhaps he saw an uninspiring country. The intervention of Donald Trump in Nigeria also has to do with the influence of China in Africa. So perhaps China can be an example of an inspiring country. So let's go to China. Why China? China is a country like Nigeria. As Nigeria got her independence in 1960, China reeled from a devastating civil war, a war that challenged millions of Chinese, a war that led to the death of millions of Chinese. At that point, when Nigeria got her independence, China was going through Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. Why China? Chinese are humans like Nigerians. I am yet to find a record that says that Chinese civilization is superior to African civilization. So how come the rest of the world advanced more than Africa? By implication, Nigeria. That is not a question I intend to address in this analysis anyway. I am interested in looking at world politics as chaotic politics. Remember, world politics has always been chaotic. Is it getting more chaotic? Until the beginning of the 21st century, Chinese traveled on slow and often uncomfortable trains. These trains prodded through their vast country. Why China improved its old railway system? Nigeria destroyed hers. China had no high-speed railways at the time Nigeria got her independence. Today, China has the world's largest network of high-speed railways. Within an 8-year period, from the year 2000, China completed about 37,900 kilometers of high-speed lines linking its major megacities clusters. As China expanded sea and road routes to connect the world, Nigeria for about a decade struggled over the construction of 1.6 kilometer second River Niger Bridge. You wonder why? As the construction of a second Niger Bridge remained a tool of politics, China, within a 9-year period, constructed the world's longest sea bridge, spanning 55 kilometers. That bridge connects Hong Kong to Macau and the mainland Chinese city of Zhuhai. I am giving an example of an inspiring country compared to Nigeria. But as we look at this, I want to ask, is Donald Trump an inspiring leader? Is he an example we should give here? You know, one thing that interests me about him is how he has decided to implement the Monroe Doctrine. That was what he did with Venezuela. The Western Hemisphere belongs to the United States and nobody should trespass. China had gone into Venezuela. China had invested billions in Venezuela oil industry. And Donald Trump struck. China has been quiet about it. What happens to the billions invested in Venezuela? When a giant like China keeps quiet over issues like that, you should be worried. Anyway, since Nigeria has not been inspiring, are there lessons to take from China? The bridge that China constructed allows for the movement of ships. The bridge has a 6.7 kilometer undersea tunnel section running between two artificial islands. A journey of 4 hours between Zhuhai and Hong Kong is now 30 minutes through the bridge. Why Xi Jinping pledges to build a modern country for a new era that will be proudly Chinese, Bola Tinubu and his co-travelers in the APC, in the PDP, in the ADC, harm the people with poverty and violence. Why Chinese leaders are forward-looking and strategic in development, Nigerian leaders are short-sighted, tribal, and uninspiring. Oh, Nigeria is poor because her leaders are mentally poor. So what is the position of poor countries in a very chaotic world politics? Russia is battling Ukraine. Joe Biden encouraged Ukraine to take on Russia. So let's listen to the voice of Joe Biden. Joe Biden was the president of the United States until recently when Donald Trump returned. Joe Biden encouraged Ukraine to take on Russia. That is one politics that has agitated the European Union and NATO. In the Middle East, it is Israel taking on Iran, it is Israel taking on Hezbollah, it is Israel taking on Hamas. In the Middle East, there's the Houthis. Saudi Arabia is deeply entrenched in Yemen. In West Africa, there's a struggle. The United States is moving in forcefully. Russia has moved in. Russia emboldens Burkina Faso. Russia emboldens Mali and Niger. France is struggling to find a new foothold in Africa. Donald Trump has rattled South America. Are we moving towards a third world war? Okay, let's listen to Joe Biden's rhetoric when he was president. It will give us a clear look about what is going on.
A criminal wants to portray NATO enlargement as an imperial project aimed at destabilizing Russia. Nothing is further from the truth. NATO is a defensive alliance. It has never sought the demise of Russia. In the lead up to the current crisis, the United States and NATO worked for months to engage Russia to avert war. I met with them in person, talked to them many times on the phone. Time and again, we offered real diplomacy and concrete proposals to strengthen European security, enhance transparency, build confidence on all sides. But Putin and Russia met each of the proposals with disinterested in any negotiation, with lies and ultimatums. Russia was bent on violence from the start. I know not all of you believed me and us when we kept saying they are going to cross the border, they are going to attack. Repeatedly, he asserted we had no interest in war, guaranteed he would not move. Repeatedly saying he would not invade Ukraine. Repeatedly saying Russian troops along the border were there for training, all 180,000 of them. There's simply no justification or provocation for Russia's choice of war. It's an example of one of the oldest human impulses, using brute force and disinformation to satisfy a craving for absolute power and control. It's nothing less than a direct challenge to the rule-based international order established since the end of World War II. And it threatens to return to decades of war that ravaged Europe before the international rule-based order was put in place. We cannot go back to that. We cannot.
So that is Biden. So you can see the Biden rhetoric setting the stage. Now look at the way he spoke about Putin, Vladimir Putin, the leader of Russia. It speaks of a new world order. Don't you think so? It speaks of a new world order. So having given example of China, Nigeria, creating an example of an inspiring country and an uninspiring one. A country where bandits can wake up in the morning, go into a school, kidnap more than 200 students. It's an uninspiring country. And the leadership of that country cannot be inspiring, especially when it happens repeatedly. Not once, at the point it was Chibok, but it is now usual. It is not unusual anymore. So that kind of country can be tossed around in world politics. The reason Donald Trump can confidently say it's a troubled country, a country of concern. You do that to uninspiring countries. No wonder some American scholars made some definitions about Nigeria. Remember, we're discussing world politics. So I'm building from Nigeria, Africa. We'll go to the Middle East. We'll go to Iran. We'll see what is going on. If you check the BBC, the stories coming out from Al Jazeera, from BBC, from CNN, tells you that the United States is planning to move into Iran. So we'll go back into history and look at that. What will be the implication of Donald Trump's politics? So let me tell you how American foreign policy scholars are thinking, how they are thinking about Nigeria. Having monitored the condition of Nigeria and having examined the consequences of the violence of the moment, the question arises of the extent of damage done to the welfare, peace, and security of the people. Providing answers, some conclude that Nigeria is a failed state. Do you think it's a failed state? Such a conclusion awakens one to the extent of the damage and gives reasons behind the tragedy of the moment. Now let's look through the analysis of Robert Rotberg and John Campbell as they argue that Nigeria has long teetered on the precipice of failure. It is their conclusion that Nigeria's lack of capacity to keep its citizens safe and secure confirms it as a fully failed state of critical geopolitical concern. Let me make this point. It is the analysis of the like of Robert Rotberg and John Campbell that defines America's foreign policy. On another edition of this program, we'll look at America's foreign policy from the Wilsonian era. We'll also go back to the Monroe Doctrine and see if anything has changed. Why did Donald Trump come into Nigeria? Remember, Robert Rotberg and John Campbell are foreign policy experts, and they have defined Nigeria as a failed state. Even before Donald Trump came in for second term, they have defined Nigeria as a failed state. Perhaps from their definition, Donald Trump says it's a troubled country, and boldly came in. The Christmas Day bombing in Sokoto is significant. Who is Rotberg? Rotberg is the founding director of the Harvard Kennedy School's program on intrastate conflict, and he is president emeritus of the World Peace Foundation. Y. Campbell is a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and a former United States ambassador to Nigeria. So when these men speak, they make a point in the interest of the United Nations. So when we talk about the Council on Foreign Relations, it reminds me of magazines like this. You can see this magazine is entitled Foreign Affairs. I subscribe to this magazine. Once you go through this magazine, you'll be able to understand how America is thinking. So if you can subscribe, find a way of subscribing to the magazine. This is the latest edition and is the new tools of power. The new tools of power. You have the Eurasian order, China against China, and you have Iran's coming transformation. You see, Iran's coming transformation, they've written about it, they've seen it already, they know what's going on. Donald Trump is just implementing. What I'm saying is that America is so strategic with its foreign policy. Sometimes it takes them about 10 years to define it. They see ahead. And when a president comes, he begins to implement. A think tank has given Donald Trump the document to work with. So I'm going back to the analysis of Rotberg, and John Campbell to create a deeper understanding of why Donald Trump is behaving the way he's behaving to Nigeria. In their article entitled "Nigeria is a Failed State," published on the 27th of May 2021 by Foreign Policy, Rotberg and Campbell identify 4 kinds of nations. They identified the one they called the strong, the weak, the failed, and the collapsed nation. They identified 4 nations: the strong nation, the weak nation, the failed nation, and the collapsed nation. So Nigeria, in the article, is the failed nation. It hasn't collapsed yet. They categorize Somalia, South Sudan, and Yemen as the collapsed states of the world. From their definitions, 80 or 90 United Nations member states are weak states by their efforts to provide some level of security and welfare for their peoples. But they posit that about a dozen of unsafe states like Nigeria, with weak rules of law, infested by monumental corruption, head down by limited political participation, are failed states. Did you get that? Let me go through it again. They posit that about a dozen of unsafe states like Nigeria, with weak rules of law, infested by monumental corruption, head down by limited political participation, are failed states. They say a failed state discriminates within its borders against various classes. That is the term they use. Discriminates within its borders against various classes. And that sparingly provides educational and medical services. That is their definition of a failed state. So do you agree that Nigeria is a failed state? Do you agree? They say a failed state discriminates within its borders against various classes. If you ask the Igbo man will say he's been discriminated against. If you go to Rivers State at the moment, the judge will say that they have been discriminated against, that Wike don't want Fubara to run for a second term. And they are insisting that if second term is good for Amechi and Wike and Peter Adeli, it must be good for Fubara. So they have defined classes. They have defined classes. Yes. A faith state sparingly provides educational and medical services. As we speak, it's either doctors are going on strike or they are negotiating with the government. Resident doctors threaten strike. You see that universities lecturers are saying they are going on strike. That is the situation. If you go to public schools in Nigeria, you may want to shed tears. primary schools. In rural areas, some don't have chairs, some don't have roofs. So Rotberg and Campbell make the point in their article that when you have such situation of poor educational system, that state has failed. You go to UCH as we speak, it's either there is no power, there is no water, there is no bandage, no plaster. Rotberg and Campbell see such situation as failure. So in the article entitled Failed State, they argue that Nigeria is a failed state. Because Nigeria is a failed state, Donald Trump is bold enough to come in. These are foreign policy scholars. Let's look at the article again. So they are saying by this, Nigeria is ranked among war-torn states like Democratic Republic of the Congo. That Nigeria is similar to Central African Republic, including the militarily oppressed state of Myanmar, former Burma. They make the point that failed states are violent, that they harbor some form of violent internal insurgency and civil war. We talk of banditry. Donald Trump talks of Christian genocide. You talk of Boko Haram terrorism. You talk of Biafran insurgency in the southeast. You talk of militancy in the south-south. You talk of Fulani herdsmen occupying communities in the Middle Belt. As we speak now, banditry is at the edges of the southwest. So they say that failed states are violent, that they harbor some form of violent internal insurgency and civil war. They aver that Nigeria's inability to stop the 6 or more insurrections within its borders tipped it from the status of a weak to a failed state. Do you agree? Do you agree with that definition? Look at the word they used in the article. The government's inability to thwart the Boko Haram insurgency is enough to diagnose Nigeria as a failed state. That's a quote from the article. The government's inability to thwart the Boko Haram insurgency is enough to diagnose Nigeria as a failed state. Rotberg and Campbell wonder why Nigerian armed forces of 300,000 troops and a $2 billion budget has failed to extirpate Boko Haram. You know, when I saw this article in 2021, I knew that Nigeria is in for troubles with the United States. Because these guys don't just write. They write to project the foreign interest of the United States. John Campbell was a former United States ambassador to Nigeria. And you know, Obama tried to tweak it. Obama frustrated Goodluck Jonathan. Biden was quiet on Nigeria. But Donald Trump has refused to be quiet. For the first time in the history of Nigeria, the United States boldly triggered a new wave of foreign policy strategy. Where is it leading to? I have titled this edition World War III, ? You know, for World War III to happen, it will be a collection of the violence around the world. The Lake Chad Basin is already an epicenter of violence. If you walk in from that basin, Mali, Niger, Chad, Nigeria. This is already an epicenter of violence. You have another epicenter in the Middle East. Donald Trump might open another one in the Western Hemisphere, Cuba, Venezuela, Colombia. Within Asia, China keep demonstrating its military power, threatening to take Taiwan. And America is saying, don't go in there. There's a problem between North Korea and South Korea. As we speak, there's the conflict between Thailand and Cambodia. By the time this violence unite, permit me to use that word, will it trigger a third world war? Iran is saying if the United States intervene in the ongoing protest, that it will strike at United States target in the Middle East. What would that lead to? Israel is not done with Hamas or Hezbollah. Saudi Arabia is ramping up its military power in Yemen. The UAE has withdrawn. Will it come back? Sudan is undergoing a severe war. Rwanda is in DR Congo. All right. Rotberg and John Campbell make the point that Nigeria's government inability to thwart the Boko Haram insurgency is enough to diagnose Nigeria as a failed state. They wonder why Nigerian armed forces cannot extirpate Boko Haram. That's the word they use. Nigeria armed forces of 300,000 troops and the $2 billion budget has failed to extirpate Boko Haram. In their estimation, corruption in the military is allegedly a major factor. That is the word. They say corruption in the military is allegedly a major factor. They also identify the uninspiring leadership of the political class for the failure. The Nigerian government disapproved of their conclusion. But at the time they released this article, a statement of the Northern Elders Forum recognized that Nigeria is sliding into disaster, connected to a weak national leadership and a broken political process. That is the Northern Elders Forum endorsed the article. As events unfold, who will stop Nigeria from dancing on the brink? Remember, John Campbell wrote a book, Nigeria Dancing on the Brink. If you have not read that book, I recommend it to you. Nigeria Dancing on the Brink. If you read that book now, you will know why Donald Trump has come. In subsequent editions, we will narrow down to America's interest in Nigeria. They said Nigeria has failed, but it hasn't collapsed. Yes. Let's see. Somebody's saying here, yeah, it's making a point that there are at least 65 gun crimes in the United States. Gun crimes, is it every day? Not to talk of domestic mass shootings in the USA every day. Yet gun ownership laws soften the more. Yeah? every country have their own kind of violence. But you would agree that what is going on in America is what you call pockets of violence. In Nigeria, you have insurgencies where bandits are occupying territories. If you go to the Lake Chad Basin, ISWAP is occupying the Lake Chad Basin. They are governing communities. Yes, no doubt there are violence in America. Sam Legend, I can see you here. Yes, let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation. And you can join the conversation. Still talking world politics. I'm looking at Africa and the violence in the Lake Chad Basin, in the Sahel, in the Congo. There's a need for us to examine some figures. The 5 largest arms exporters in 2016 to 2020 were the United States, Russia, France, Germany, and China. The 5 largest arms importers were Saudi Arabia, India, Egypt, Australia, and China. That is from 2016 to 2020. Some would ask, China importing arms? Because China is a weapon producer. But I was asking myself, how come China could not save Nicolas Maduro? Because China, Russia were critical backers of the Maduro government. How come these big powers could not save Maduro from the hands of the United States? That speaks volume. Perhaps China is yet to have that military power to stand up to America. It is clear that Russia is getting weaker. Russia is already bogged down in Ukraine. Remember, the JF Kennedy government wanted to do what Trump did to Maduro, to Fidel Castro in Cuba. Remember the Bay of Pigs? Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson. They wanted to invade Cuba. But the Soviet Union came to the defense of Cuba. Go and study the Bay of Pigs. The Soviet Union was powerful. It moved its warship into the ocean and said, no, you cannot invade Cuba. That was a powerful Soviet Union. But this time, America went into Venezuela, took out its president, and there was Russia and China. They did not bat an eyelid. Perhaps it speaks volume of China's military power. But again, remember, China also adopts the laws of war as enshrined in the book written by Sun Tzu, The Art of War. And one of the critical doctrines in that book, The Art of War, is to even fight without shooting. Is to go to war without fighting. That means you even win your war before the war starts. Is that what China is looking at? Waiting for America to exhaust itself. To exhaust itself. America have military stations in different parts of the world. Will America ever exhaust itself? Have you studied the long circle theory? America has become the superpower since 1945, at the end of the World War. Some have been predicting the fall of the United States. America is refusing to fall. But there's also the rise of the rest. Russia is the largest exporter of weapons to sub-Saharan Africa. I'm looking at data from 2016 to 2020. Russia is the largest exporter of weapons to sub-Saharan Africa. Africa received 18% of Russian arms exports between 2016 and 2020. I want you to note, the figures I'm talking about were extracted from a report entitled Trends in International Arms Transfer 2020, published in March 2021 by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, remember, is a war against the policies of the United States and its allies in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. That war, that ongoing war, is a reenactment of the politics of World War II and the Cold War. The reenactment of the politics of World War II and the Cold War, will it lead to World War III? What will be the place of Africa, Nigeria, if that war ensues? Can Nigeria stand its own? Can Nigeria withstand the force of a world war? Does it mean the recolonization of African states? Let's not go there yet. I want to read from this book, The State of Africa, by Martin Meredith, A History of the Continent Since Independence. The State of Africa, A History of the Continent Since Independence. I want to read from page 466. This is the book. I just want to draw your attention to how the world thinks about Africa. It says, despite the extreme poverty of Somalia and its lack of resources, the main energies of the Somali government at independence were concentrated on unification. From the outset, Somalia made clear its refusal to accept the validity of any of its existing borders. It actively supported Somalia insurgents in Kenya's northern frontier district and in the Ogaden. It also opened negotiations with the United States, West Germany, and Italy, aiming to establish an army to carry out its own military campaigns. But the most that Western powers were willing to provide was equipment and training for a force of 5,000 men intended to deal with nothing more serious than internal security. This was when Somalia got her independence. It consulted the United States, West Germany, and other countries to help it establish its military. That's the point Martin Meredith is making here. In 1963, however, the Soviet Union came forward with an offer to establish an army of 10,000 men, together with a small air force, and the Somalis swiftly accepted it. Can you see what politics in a new state? Somalia ran to the United States to help, and the United States said, we can help you to train 5,000 men to just police you. This was during the Cold War. The Soviet Union came in and said, hey, yes, we can help you. We'll help you train 10,000 men, arm them. And Somalia jumped on that offer. So at this point, Somalia found itself between the devil and the deep blue sea. One world power offered to help sparingly, the United States. And the other world power said, I can help you boldly. So at this time, Somalia had offended the United States. Oh, so you are now a friend to my enemy. Okay, we will deal with you. If you go to Somalia today, that politics of the 1960s led to the civil war in Somalia. Somalia is still reeling from that war as we speak now. Martin Meredith says at the time, the Soviet Union looked for no particular advantage in Somalia, nor did it support the government's plan for a greater Somalia. A brief, full-scale war between Somalia and Ethiopia in 1964 ended in an Ethiopian victory within a matter of days. You know why? What happened? Since Somalia has taken the side of the Soviet Union, and there was a problem between Somalia and Ethiopia over the Ogaden region, Somalia argued at the time that the Ogaden region ought not to be part of Ethiopia because Ogadens are Somalis. So Somalia wanted to forcefully take Ogaden because at this time he believed that he had the weapons that had been supplied by the Soviet Union. But America also armed Ethiopia. And both countries went to war. You see what politics? In action. We'll read more from this book. I recommend this book to you. The Challenge, The State of Africa, A History of the Continent Since Independence by Martin Meredith. This book should be on your bookshelf. Yes, this book. You should have this book. I'll come back to it. So I was talking about arms in Africa. And I also made the point that what is going on at the moment is a reenactment of the politics of World War II and the Cold War. I'm also ready to read your comments. Nigeria a failed state? Question mark. You know, there's also a failed state, there's a collapsed state. But I'm also, President Trump says help on his way to Iran. It is not funny though. He says the cool thing in the Venezuelan scenario is that the US watched as Russia straightened Venezuela air defenses with its newest radar system. China supplied them with some 35 of its latest aircraft. But America has proven a point that, hey, China and Russia, you're still behind us. Because the way America went in, got Maduro out, I'm still wondering what it means for the Western Hemisphere. Now, what the World War II and the Cold War did, both wars launched a new era in world politics. And that's the reason every watcher of domestic and international politics must pay attention to what is going on at the moment. What Donald Trump is doing around the world at the moment, we have ripple effects on the countries of Africa. And if there is a World War III, something is telling me, okay, let me keep that to myself. But the West African sub-region will be in crisis, serious crisis. And one of the signs of the danger signs, you can see the military has taken over in Burkina Faso, in Niger, in Chad. The guy in Chad might be pretending that he's a democracy, but he's a military guy. You know, after his father was killed, he just resigned from the army. Did he resign from the army? He just put his uniform and transformed into a so-called democratic president. And recently the military struck in Benin, but they did not succeed. The invasion of Ukraine tells us that world politics is moving towards a dangerous terrain. And before that invasion, watchers of politics were already studying Mali, Chad, and Burkina Faso. So, I don't know what you're thinking, but I know you are concerned. Beyond the West African frontier and the politics of destabilization at play, what are the roles of international actors like France, United States, Russia, and China? There's a suspicion that the coups in Mali and Burkina Faso had the involvement of Russian mercenaries, then the Wagner force. Remember that the announcement of the success of the Burkina Faso coup, there was one Captain Sitso Kada Quadrogo. You know, before Traore came in, there was a military guy that overthrew the government of Burkina Faso. And Traore then overthrew the same military guy. So announcing the success of the Burkina Faso coup, Captain Sitso, spokesman for the patriotic movement for safeguarding and restoration of Burkina Faso, stated on national television that they toppled the democratic regime of President Campbell due to the continuous deterioration of the security situation in Burkina Faso. And they said that the security crisis was threatening the foundations of the country. A day after that coup, Alexander Ivanov, the official representative of Russian military trainers in the Central African Republic, offered a hand of partnership to the military regime, offering military training. It wasn't a coincidence. They knew something about the coup. They were part of the coup. The way France sponsored Blaise Compaoré to topple Thomas Sankara. So these Russian mercenaries had been operating in Libya and the Central African Republic since 2017, from where they are spreading their dragnets to countries in the Sahel. Remember during the bad governance demonstration in Nigeria recently, Russian flags were flown in the north. There are reports that before the military struck, they had asked President Campbell to invite Russians to help stop the militants in Burkina Faso, but he turned them down. Campbell was still looking up to France to help. Confirming the presence of the Wagner group in Mali, the head of the United States Africa Command, AFRICOM, at the time, General Stephen Townsend, made this statement. I quote him, "Wagner Group is in Mali. They are there. We think numbering several hundred now. Russian Air Force airplanes are delivering them." So as we are talking, there is a dangerous tension between Russia and America in Africa. But we are not seeing it yet. It will begin to play out soon. Townsend, who took over U.S. Africa Command in 2019, also talked about the threat posed by China's ambition in West Africa. The bombing in Sokoto is a launch of the struggle, of the military struggle for Africa between Russia, China, and the United States. It is a scramble for Africa. Another scramble for Africa has begun. Let's go back into time. Let's listen to George Bush. You know, George Bush spoke about the axis of evil. The axis of evil. George Bush spoke about the axis of evil. After George Bush came Obama. After Obama came Trump, Biden. So after 16 years, if you listen to this speech of George Bush, you would understand what is going on in Iran at the moment. Let's feel the voice of Bush.
Our second goal is to prevent regimes that sponsor terror from threatening America or our friends and allies with weapons of mass destruction. Some of these regimes have been pretty quiet since September the 11th, but we know their true nature. North Korea is a regime arming with missiles and weapons of mass destruction while starving its citizens. Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranian people's hope for freedom. Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror. The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade. This is a regime that has already used poison gas to murder thousands of its own citizens, leaving the bodies of mothers huddled over their dead children. This is a regime that agreed to international inspections, then kicked out the inspectors. This is a regime that has something to hide from the civilized world. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world. By seeking weapons of mass destruction, these regimes pose a grave and growing danger. They could provide these arms to terrorists, giving them the means to match their hatred. They could attack our allies or attempt to blackmail the United States. In any of these cases, the price of indifference would be catastrophic. We will work closely with our coalition to deny terrorists and their state sponsors the materials, technology, and expertise to make and deliver weapons of mass destruction. We will develop and deploy effective missile defenses to protect America and our allies from sudden attack. And all nations should know America will do what is necessary to ensure our nation's security. We'll be deliberate, yet time is not on our side. I will not wait on events while dangers gather. I will not stand by as peril draws closer and closer. The United States of America will not permit the world's most dangerous regimes to threaten us with the world's most destructive weapons.
You know, that was George Bush threatening Iran. So Iran has been coming. Obama also threatened Iran. Joe Biden threatened Iran. I'm looking at this book, The Third Reich in Power. How the Nazis won over the hearts and minds of a nation. You know, the Nazis caused the Second World War. With Donald Trump caused the Third World War. What is the place of Africa? What was striking about this process was not so much the way it was pushed forward by the party's economic officials, but the extent to which agencies of the state were involved as well, and the latter were, if anything, even more unscrupulous than the former. You know, when wars want to come, democratic presidents will become more militant in nature. They will begin to hijack state institutions. Like Donald Trump did not tell Congress that he was moving into Venezuela. The same thing Hitler and co did. At some point, Hitler began to hijack all government institutions. As we speak, Donald Trump is harassing the chairman of Treasury in America because the man has refused to dance to his tune. So if you read this book, The Third Reich in Power, how the Nazis won over the hearts and minds of a nation, you begin to think that the world has become more chaotic. But if you also studied politics, this can also be one of the most peaceful times in world history. Yes, one of the most peaceful times in world history. Before the concert of Europe, European nations were at war every day, killing themselves. I remember that was what also led to the birth of the League of Nations after World War I. So what I'm doing here this day is to look at the indicators that might trigger a World War III. I've looked at Nigeria, what foreign policy scholars think about Nigeria. And when I talk about foreign policy scholars, United States foreign policy scholars. So I recommend this book to you, The Third Reich in Power, How the Nazis Won Over the Hearts and Minds of a Nation. Here's the book. You can see the book. There's the book to read as we navigate through the show. Yes. I was talking about AFRICOM, what General Stephen Townsend said. Townsend said that Wagner groups is in Mali, that they are there. We think numbering several hundred now. Russian Air Force planes are delivering them. Townsend, who took over the U.S. Africa Command in 2019, also talked about the threat posed by China's ambition in West Africa. He said the Chinese are the most active, that American challengers in Africa, with the intent of building a military base or naval facility in Equatorial Guinea. You can see the geopolitics unraveling in Africa. Listen to this again. Townsend talked of the threat posed by China's ambition in West Africa. He said the Chinese are the most active American challengers in Africa, with the intent of building a military base or naval facility in Equatorial Guinea. Recently we did a report on Itasa, mining crisis in Itasa. From that investigation, there are foreign influence driving the mining sector in Nigeria. And mining sector is one of the most critical sectors at this stage of our development. But it's being controlled by mostly Chinese. America comes with guns. China comes with economic weapons. They build rail lines for you, fine. It is good. I don't blame them. They are fighting in their own interest. But what about African states? Whose interest are they protecting? The interest of leaders. The interest of leaders, that is what they protect. They don't protect the general interest of the people. So Townsend at the time warned Equatorial Guinea to choose carefully who to follow, saying that the Chinese military base in Equatorial Guinea is of great concern to the United States and all of their partners. He made mention of the subtle maneuvers of Iranian security forces on the continent, stating that their inroads are going to be very malign in nature. Iran. He talks about Iran. That Iran was making inroad into Africa. And that their inroads are going to be very malign in nature. It is very nascent. It is happening now, and we are watching, he said. But at the time, Iran denied any involvement in the Sahel. So due to these challenges coming from Russia, China, and Iran, The United States says its military has brought in new and improved defense systems and anti-drone weapons to its military camp in Djibouti. And that is America's only military base in Africa. Is Donald Trump planning a military base in Bakassi Peninsula? In the days to come, we will answer that question. Remember, the United States arms exports grew by 15% between 2011 and 2015. And from 2016 to 2020, America increased its global share from 32 to 37%. That means America is arming the world. Why? The United States delivered major arms to 96 countries in 2016 to 2020, a far higher number of recipients than any other supplier in world history. In 2016 to 2020, total arms export by the United States were 85% higher than those of Russia, the second largest exporter, compared with 24% in 2011 to 2015. That means Russia cannot stand the US. You can see America is bullying everybody, and everybody's quiet. It's even Europe that surprises me most. Europe is so scared of the United States. When Donald Trump coughs, Europe catches cold. So Britain has been that weak. France has been that weak. You can see the way even France was easily displaced in the West African sub-region. The way France was kicked out of Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, with ease. They relied so much on the United States powers. And I'll tell you why Europe has been that weak. I'll come to that. I'll come to that. I'll come to that. Or should I just come to that now? Why Europe has been that weak? Let's come to that. Let's look at that. Because the weakness of Europe also has caused chaos in Africa and the Middle East. I will link it. But let's look at why America could easily bully Europe of today. You know, when Donald Trump came with this tariff war, the UK was almost begging. You know, you can see the way Trump talks about Macron, the way he mentions his name. This was France, that was a powerful country. France has a veto power in the United Nations. United Kingdom has veto power in the United Nations. But they can't look into the eyes of the United States. Why? Let's go through history. I've mentioned the Monroe Doctrine, but in subsequent edition, we'll look at the Roosevelt Plan. That was when we'll expand on that. But remember that the principles of the Monroe Doctrine also influenced the Harry Truman Doctrine. Harry Truman was the president of the United States during the Second World War. Roosevelt died before the war ended, and his vice, Harry Truman, took over leadership and then ended the war. So there was what is called the Truman Doctrine. And the point I'm making here is that Monroe Doctrine influenced Truman Doctrine. The only difference is that the focus of Truman's was the Soviet Union, while at the same time bringing friendly nations under the defense umbrella of the United States. The Truman Doctrine brought the friends of the United States under the protection, under the umbrella of American security. And who are the friends of the United States? Mostly European states, Western Europe. Western Europe came under the umbrella of America's security through the Truman Doctrine. Part of the Truman Doctrine was a program of assistance worth $400 million extended to Greece and Turkey. But Western Europe needed a special intervention to revamp its ailing economy, devastated by World War II. I'm trying to profile reasons why Europe cannot look into the eyes of the United States, why America can confidently bully Europe. So we are going into that. At the end of World War II, United States became one of the richest countries in the world. United States led the Allied forces to defeat the Axis forces. Part of the Allied forces was the Soviet Union. America and the Soviet Union fought on the same side. England or Britain, France were part of the Allied forces. The Axis forces were led by Germany, Adolf Hitler's Germany. Japan was part of the Axis forces. Italy, they lost the war. When the Allied forces won the war, they divided the spoils of the war among themselves. And the two big powers in the Allied team were the United States and the Soviet Union. So that struggle over who controls what between the two big powers in that Allied team led to the Cold War. So at the end of World War II, the struggle for power by the victorious forces is what we know as the Cold War. America on one side, Soviet Union on the other side. So at the end of that war, European countries became broke because the epicenter of World War II was Europe. That was where the war was mainly fought. So they became broke. Through the Truman Doctrine, the United States assisted Greece and Turkey with $400 million. But Western Europe needed a special intervention to revamp its ailing economy devastated by the war. With communist agents on the rampage, an emergency program for Western Europe would stave off communist domination through the toppling of capitalist government. This would have been easy because the desperation of Europeans to find jobs and eke out a living was palpable. They became poor. Europe became poor. Nigeria became independent in 1960. If not for World War II, I don't think Britain was ready to grant us independence. But due to the war, Britain became weak. You could see after the war, many African countries became independent. Ghana became independent in 1957. That was when Woodrow Wilson even ordered Western Europe to get ready to decolonize Africa. So with the war, they became weak. They could not even control their empires anymore. The British Empire collapsed. So they had no option but to begin to grant independence to most of their colonies. So they needed assistance from the United States. Otherwise, Soviet Union would assist them. And if Soviet Union assisted them, it would be the rise of communism. The Cold War was an ideological struggle. The struggle of capitalism against communism. That is the theory of the Cold War. America led the capitalist nations, and the Soviet Union led the communist nations like Yugoslavia, Poland, Romania, Hungary. So any attempt to allow the communist alternative would have given the people a choice of ideology in Western Europe. The Truman government then initiated the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was named after United States Secretary of State George Marshall. Announcing the plan in 1947, Marshall said it was an exercise to help start the European world on its way to recovery. The point is that Western Europe needed to survive communist adventures for it to continue to buy United States products. If the communists took over Western Europe will no longer trade with America. America didn't want that. So America was ready to give them money to say, okay, take this money and survive. But you are linked to us. The Marshall Plan was, on one hand, to protect the United States economy, and on the other hand, to keep Europe within the capitalist system. The Marshall Plan, perhaps the most successful U.S. foreign policy program in history, offered American military and economic assistance to promote free market economies with Europe. The program, which was dispersed through the Economic Cooperation Act of 1948, eventually re-established Britain, France, West Germany to their great power status. So it was America that revived them and placed them under her security umbrella. And they forgot themselves. They forgot themselves. Europe believed that America will always come to its aid. And Donald Trump came and said, no, there's no free lunch. Told Ukraine, all the weapons that Joe Biden gave you are going to pay for it. You pay for it with your resources. And the bomb that Donald Trump threw in Sokoto, we are going to pay for it. We are going to pay for it. I hope you know. Are you ready to pay for that bomb in Sokoto? If you're ready to pay, can you contribute your money? Contribute your money now. Let's see. Somebody says here, until we'll adopt the mindset of the likes of Thomas Sankara, Nelson Mandela, Nkrumah, to build our communities from within. Pull your brothers and sisters up to build Africa. The spirit exists. I wish we could. But why did Nkrumah and Co not succeed in building it? Did America intervene? America intervened and removed Nkrumah. The CIA removed Nkrumah in Ghana in a military coup. They did. You can see the way Maduro was trying to resist them. They went in. They took him out. By the time I come fully to the Iran story, you see how America removed Mossadegh. Mossadegh was the prime minister of Iran before the Iranian Revolution. We'll come to that. We'll come to that. Or do you want to... You can also call me. You can also call. You can see the numbers on those screen. You can see the numbers scrolling on the screen. Yes, you can call those numbers on WhatsApp so that we can have a conversation, can have your feedback. So the numbers, just get the numbers on the screen. Okay, we have just one number on the screen, and you can call that number. You can call that number on WhatsApp. Yeah, I'll put you on. I want us to listen to George Bush again, The Axis of Evil. We have played it just now, but I want you to digest the message. Axis of Evil. George Bush, a former president of the United States of America.
Our second goal is to prevent regimes that sponsor terror from threatening America or our friends and allies with weapons of mass destruction. Some of these regimes have been pretty quiet since September the 11th, but we know their true nature. North Korea is a regime arming with missiles and weapons of mass destruction while starving its citizens. Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranian people's hope for freedom. Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror. The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade. This is a regime that has already used poison gas to murder thousands of its own citizens, leaving the bodies of mothers huddled over their dead children. This is a regime that agreed to international inspections, then kicked out the inspectors. This is a regime that has something to hide from the civilized world. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world. By seeking weapons of mass destruction, these regimes pose a grave and growing danger. They could provide these arms to terrorists, giving them the means to match their hatred. They could attack our allies or attempt to blackmail the United States. In any of these cases, the price of indifference would be catastrophic. We will work closely with our coalition to deny terrorists and their state sponsors the materials, technology, and expertise to make and deliver weapons of mass destruction. We will develop and deploy effective missile defenses to protect America and our allies from sudden attack. And all nations should know America will do what is necessary to ensure our nation's security. We'll be deliberate, yet time is not on our side. I will not wait on events while dangers gather. I will not stand by as peril draws closer and closer. The United States of America will not permit the world's most dangerous regimes to threaten us with the world's most destructive weapons.
Yeah. So you can call and let me hear from you. Let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation about world politics. African politics is also world politics. So the number is scrolling on the screen, but I can also reel it out to you. It is 080 309 18449. Okay, I have a caller here, and that's DG. Hello, DG.
Yeah, good evening. Well done with the work you're doing, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I essentially wanted to, can I go on, sir?
Yes, please go on.
All right. So I essentially wanted to respond to your broadcast and with the question, where exactly?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yes, I had a call. I wanted to respond to where is Nigeria in all of this. I think the way Nigeria must situate herself in world politics is that we have to build from ground up. And I think the very first thing we want to look at seriously is that we want to pay attention to our education. Now, I personally do not feel that, I don't think that there's much hope with a lot of the generation that is ahead of us. Even my own generation is probably even going away. But I'm looking more at our young people. Our young people have to be given sound education. We have to send our children to school. Not only that, we have to also look at the children of our neighbors and ensure they get good education. What you are doing on radio is education. So we all have to educate ourselves. We have to buy books and read. That's the first thing. But it doesn't stop there. I think also that we also have to add to our education something I call altruism, or something we can call altruism, unselfishness. because I realized that while a lot of people have gotten a lot of education in Nigeria, there has been this self-centeredness that has made it, that has led to people building their own fiefdom and kingdoms and not paying attention to other people. But unselfishness, altruism will make you look to another person and see that when all of us are strong together, then the nation will be strong. There is a scramble for Africa. If we do not take time, Africa can be recolonized with the way we are going, because we have the resources, we have the weather, we have everything, we have human resources. But unfortunately, we do not have leadership, we do not have educated people, and somehow we're just not getting it right. So that's what I wanted to add to your broadcast.
Thank you, DJ Yusufu. I appreciate this call.
Yeah. Thank you, Baba.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
General Edmond, the Lieutenant General Edmond, the General of History, Geography, Science, and Political Science.
Thank you.
My name is Lannister Aspiration. I'm calling from the city of New York. So I want to first of all say thank you for taking us to the geopolitics part of history today, and it's a very good one. However, I will start where the last caller stopped, but put a different dimension to it. When you talk about education, from what Nigeria can learn, this is probably one of the most polarized we have ever been as a society. And I'm telling you now, from even in 1979, it wasn't this. If you look at the three major political parties, as at that time, they have some national coloration to them. Then, of course, the Third Republic, I think the June 12th. If you remember, during the June 12th, we already have about 21 governors then, or 30 governors, I can't remember. We have some governors that have been sworn in the SDP, in the NRC. In fact, Lagos was even NRC. Then, of course, the two presidential election. If you recollect what General Babangida was trying to do then, was to have the American kind of system, the Democratic Party and the National Republican Convention, just to see how we can push ideology. And that's why when Babangida was coming in, what he did was to first ban the old political guards from the 79 Republic. Because if you look at the people that dominated the 79 Republic, they were the same class of the First and Second Republic of 63, 66. That was what he did then, to make sure that, okay, if you have held any political office before, if you had, whether as a military or as a civilian, you can't participate in this, which some people also see as, abuse of rights, but I kind of see on both sides. Then we came back to the 99. So what we now noticed in the 99 was that we always have two classes of people, the elite consensus and the populace. You can't take it away from election. Whether it's right or wrong, it's a separate conversation. The elite consensus and the populace. It's always easier when you have a popular figure on both sides. But what you now see in the 99 is that the elite consensus had a strong military influence, and that's why they could agree on someone like Obasanjo. But now, to 2023, a lot of things have happened. And I'm saying this because you yourself, you are a historian, but I don't want you to drive that history to popular demand. And I'm saying this because the day Nigerians will start understanding how the elite think, the table checkers think, I think there will be one step forward. Right now, we're in a very, very polarized system that even when we are supposed to get credit, we don't even get, because everybody's trying to make a political point.
Thank you.
But to wrap people up, General, one thing I will see we need to do is to take away this victim mentality. To take it away when we are talking of power. Nobody gives power to victims. You give power to people who understand power. We have to take it away. So that's what Nigeria can learn in the geopolitics of what you have said about. We don't need to necessarily do an anti-West kind of rhetoric. We can partner with the West. There's nothing wrong with that. But we'll have to have our own ideology as a pan-Nigerian group. Because that's one of the mistakes the Burkina Fasos of this world are making right now. You can push an anti-West, but it has to be strategic and diplomatic because the world is evolved. It's evolved. But when you have your own ideology, nobody will make you feel like a victim mentality. We must stop victim mentality in our political circles.
Thank you.
I hope I make sense.
Thank you. You've made some solid points. Thank you. How is New York?
Yeah, the city of New York is good. We have a new mayor, Zora Mandani. He's a democratic socialist, and he ran on the democratic socialist agenda, which would never happen in America. It's a historical. It was an unprecedented one. He was from Democrat, but he won the popular vote. So the current mayor was also a Democrat, Eric Adams, and he had to move to independent. The former governor, Andrew Cuomo, who was a lifetime Democrat too, in fact, second generation, he now ran independence. So the Elon Musk of this world, even the president himself, President Donald J. Trump, and the establishment supported Cuomo. You know, they supported Cuomo. In fact, people dropped to support Cuomo because he's the establishment. But the Zoran, who is a Muslim, Indian parent, born in Uganda, his middle name is Kwame. He ran it, and he was unapologetic about his socialism because he felt that the reality of New York of today, of 21st century, is not what it used to be 20 years ago. America is not what it used to be 30 years ago. And they won the popular vote with 1 million, and I think 1,800,000 to Kumo who won 900. It was a close tie. It was probably the most tight election because, you know, in America, certain states determine how federal may look. And this year it's going to be midterm, which is something I really think even Nigeria can run. So the way the midterm election is run...
Okay, let's end it at this point now so that other callers can join the discussion.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Lanista.
Right, yes,
I appreciate your call.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lanista is full of events, stories, and time. I always like hearing his voice. Okay, we have another caller here. Okay, he hasn't connected. All right. Yes, I was talking about why Donald J. Trump can easily intimidate Europe. And that's what took me to the Marshall Plan. We are discussing world politics. World politics is also local politics. And where is the place of Nigeria in all this? So the Marshall Plan was dispersed through the Economic Cooperation Act of 1948. And that plan eventually re-established Britain, France, West Germany to their great power status. Is somebody asking me why West Germany?
Yes.
Hello? Yeah, I picked your call, so make your contribution.
Oh, good day, Edmond. It's good to be on the phone with you. I'm calling. My name is Samuel. I'm calling from UK. Wow. I think for me, I've listened to you, and really, I'm really happy for your excellent submission, especially on the global affairs. And for me, what's concerned for me is the need for me, considering the whole issues in the world, global politics at the moment. I think there's a need for comprehensive reform of the United Nations. And why do I say this? Because at the moment, I think the United Nations need to be reformed to meet the realities of the modern global politics. And why do I say this? Because for me, sovereignty of all nations, whether large or small, is being threatened. And the world has changed. You're talking about World War, and the world has, the World War II, since 1945, the world has changed dramatically. And the power dynamics have shifted. We now have new regional blocks have emerged. Even global challenges has cut across borders. Yet, the United Nations structure, especially the Security Council, still reflects a war that no longer exists as far as I'm concerned. It no longer exists. Today, we see powerful states openly threatening the internal affairs of weaker nations. We see selective respect for international law. I made a post on this last week, on this the effect you read on international law, how selective it is. We see global institutions struggle to respond when sovereignty is violated. For me, this is a dangerous trend. If the UN cannot guarantee the sovereignty of its member states, then the very foundation of the international system is at risk. Another way to say it, that reform is desired. We need reform at this moment of the UN. It is necessary. We need a United Nations that reflects today's geopolitical realities, not the politics of 80 years ago. We need the United Nations that can protect the sovereignty of all nations, not just those with veto power. And we need more accountability. When I mean accountability, no country is above the rule. So in summary for me, we need a United Nations that can give stronger voice to Africa, Latin America, the Middle East.
But what is Africa? What is Africa bringing to the table?
Oh, Edmond, the truth is this: the mere fact that we are a member of the United Nations, because the foundation of the United Nations is to protect the weak and the strong. And that was the essence of the United Nations. Because the Second World War Africa was involved in the Second World War.
But who created who created the United Nations? Is it not the United States?
It's a combination of nations. That's why it's called United Nations.
Yeah, we know. But the biggest power that was behind the United Nations, was it not the United States?
Yes, the United Nations is the biggest power, but let's be factual here. The United Nations Charter is the constitution. It's just like when you talk about nations come together as a country, we have the constitution. But we must respect the constitution. The United Nations Charter is the constitution of the United Nations.
But it's a
constitution. If that charter is violated,
but it cannot be enforced. It cannot be enforced. That's the issue.
I agree with you, Edmond. That's why I said that the United Nations must be reformed to face the modern reality of world global politics.
Thank you.
If it's not, because the truth is this: it's a matter of time before the United Nations will become just, as far as I'm concerned, it's just a mere institution. In theory, it appears as the strongest institution all over the world, but in reality, in practical, it's just like it's an institution that cannot bite. And this, for me, I'm concerned, it must be reformed to meet the modern reality.
Thank you.
Of world politics.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Interesting. You know, why did the League of Nations fail? You know, at the end of the Second World War, the peace that ended the First World War, that peace of Westphalia, or the Vienna Treaty, as the case may be, not the Westphalia, that gave birth to the League of Nations. the League of Nations failed because one of the greatest power at the time was not part of the League of Nations, the United States. Woodrow Wilson wanted to be part of the United Nations or the League of Nations. He was the president of the United States at the time. But the United States Congress voted against America joining the League of Nations. At that point, you could say America was in isolation, perhaps getting ready to conquer the world. So because of the absence of the United States in the League of Nations, it did not survive the test of time. Because the League of Nations was created to ensure that the world never went into another world war. So the coming of the Second World War was a clear failure of the League of Nations. So America was then instrumental in the formation of the United Nations. I just give you one of the reasons the League of Nations failed, one of the reasons. But who enforces the laws of the United Nations, the Charter of the United Nations? Who enforces that charter? It must be the big powers. So America can choose to enforce it when it benefits the United States. But Nigeria cannot enforce it now. Nigeria cannot even take care of itself. So it's still the big powers that can enforce it. That is why some big powers were given veto power. The only big power that did not get veto power was Germany, because Germany was the loser of the war. So are we looking at the death of the United Nations? Because despite the resistance of the United Nations, the United States and Britain went into Iraq, went into Afghanistan, despite the resolutions of the United Nations. Even Donald Trump don't give a hoot about the UN. Left to Donald Trump, he will kick out the United Nations. So I was talking about the Marshall Plan. I'm still getting a lot of calls. Okay, let's take this call. Hello. So once I pick your call, you turn down the volume of your device. I picked your call.
Good morning, sir. I just feel my live channel is a little bit back. I apologize, but I'm very, very honored to speak to you. I've been an ardent follower of yours for a very long time, and like the previous caller mentioned, you're indeed a general of history, politics, and power. You influence young people like myself, and I pray you and your team continue to do great and fantastic work. Going straight, I have a comment, an observation, and I believe a question. I'll start with my observation. Basically, I believe previous callers and yourself have said it all. We can't be both judge and jury if we want world progression. America being the enforcer of the charter behind the United Nations already tells us where the problem is. And when you listen to leaders like Mia Motley, she has gone to the United Nations